I loved what you said there about ambition without action becoming anxiety because we all want to do something, you know. We all see these headlines, we all see the news, and deep in our hearts, we want to do something about it. And that's why it's so important to be able to make a plan of action.
Welcome back to another episode of the Creators for Change podcast. In this episode, we are talking about a huge problem that many people are experiencing today. I would say probably the majority of people, and that is having so much information in our heads that we end up not doing anything. Especially with the rise of AI, we even have personalized information at our fingertips. So today we're going to talk about how to turn awareness into action, how to move from knowing something to actually do something so that we can create change, not just in our own lives, but to create the change that we wish to see in the world. My name is Ari. I am your host. I am a Kajabi expert, YouTube expert, and I started this philanthropy podcast where we talk about how to create change in your own life and we spotlight change makers using social media for good causes, especially to raise mental health awareness. And today I'm joined by my co-host Kayla. Kayla, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ari. I'm Kayla. I have a bachelor's in neuroscience and a master's in science communication, and it is my mission to increase media literacy and help people just know what's going on. Our last podcast that we did together, we spoke about how to spot fake news, how to decipher what's true and what's not. And if you weren't there, I'll just remind you briefly, we talked about the 5 C's of credibility that we use, which are clarity, credentials, consistency, context, and confirmation bias. And now that we know how to decipher what's real and what's not, like Ari said, we need to speak about the information overload that we're getting and how to turn it into something we can use.
Yes, and if you haven't checked out that episode, be sure to watch it after this one because we talk about how you could use those 5 C's to determine what's true and what's not, both on social media and with AI. And so to start this episode, like I said, many of you can relate to feeling overwhelmed, feeling so bogged down with so much information that it leads to overwhelm and inaction. So, to start this, we want to share moments when Kayla and I both felt stuck in awareness recently. So, we'll go first. So, with recent events lately, I have grown a big concern about certain systems that are collapsing. As I mentioned, I'm a YouTube expert and a Kajabi expert, and many of my clients are using those platforms to spread their message, create change. And I happen to work with people who are above the age of 50. And so, with recent changes in policies, I was genuinely overwhelmed with information about what's going to happen to their retirement plans, what's going to happen to their healthcare plans, even the rise of groceries. How are they going to send their grandchildren to school? Because many of them had plans to do that. And so I felt very recently stuck in awareness, not knowing what to do because I knew that I wanted to help and I wasn't sure how. So later in this episode, I'll tell you how I was able to move through that. But before we do, Kayla, do you want to share about a story where you felt stuck?
Yeah, I mean, I see all the same things that you're talking about. And then even more on social media, there's just so much going on. It's hard to even pin down one topic. Um, but for me, what I've been seeing a lot of that's really kind of brought me down, made me feel burnt out, anxious, is all of this climate news. And I follow a lot of environmental activists and conservationists, and they all have so many things to say about everything going on, some more positive than others. But just watching all the videos back to back to back, seeing the posts and tweets, is not very helpful for your brain because it's just too much. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about how to pick something and figure out how to make change about that one thing that you pick.
Yes, absolutely. Especially when you're passionate about a subject, like how Kayla is passionate about the climate. Having so much information, especially when they contradict each other, it can make you feel a bit helpless. Like, okay, what can I do to support this cause? And so whatever cause pulls on your heartstrings, in this episode, we're going to help you move from that overwhelm to filtering out the noise so that you have enough clarity and confidence to take those next steps forwards. And the first thing I'll say is that, and Kayla, you can add to this, but I really want to make it clear that awareness alone, it can feel very paralyzing. So if you're experiencing that, you're absolutely not alone. It's part of how our brains are wired when we have so much information. It's almost like we're a deer in headlights, you know? And so I just want you to know that, just because you know something, that doesn't automatically mean that you know what you need to do to act on it. You have to filter through the noise and get clear, and you need to really have the right information. And readiness requires not just knowledge, but also resilience, which can look like a number of things. It can look like a good support system, maybe a mentor, having a clear roadmap, but ambition without action becomes anxiety. So it's important that no matter what, you find a way to get clear and actually do something because messy action, imperfect action is better than not doing anything at all. And here at Creators for Change, we inspire you to take action, but not to be perfect. So even doing little things can make a big difference in whatever area that you feel called to do. Do you have anything to add to that, Kayla?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I loved what you said there about ambition without action becoming anxiety because we all want to do something, you know. We all see these headlines, we all see the news, and deep in our hearts, we want to do something about it. And that's why it's so important to be able to make a plan of action.
Big time. Yeah, and there's this myth that you need to know everything before taking action. That's absolutely not true. Some of the most successful people, people who stand firmly as a creator for change, as a leader in their space, they don't know a lot of stuff. They kind of just jump into it, and that's how they learn. There's actually a learning, like a pyramid of learning, which we could display here. And it talks about how you learn the most by actually doing the thing. Whereas you learn less by reading about it, sitting in lecture, being on the internet. So just remember that, everyone. I know it's scary, but those first steps could be simple and then you could work your way up.
Yeah, you don't need to know everything, but obviously you do need to make sure that if you're taking action, the information that you're spreading is accurate because we do not want to be spreading misinformation. Something else about taking in all this information is that it really takes a toll emotionally, and for certain groups more than others, definitely for the people who are affected by climate change and social injustice more than others, because these communities often bear the brunt of the work and the responsibility when it comes to staying informed and sharing information, just because they are the ones affected, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And it reminds me of that saying, like, before you judge someone, before you look down on someone, like, try walking a mile in their shoes. And that just putting yourself through that mental exercise can help you open your heart. I think that's the biggest thing. I think, and this is just a theory, I think having so much information on the internet and with AI has caused us to be overwhelmed to the point where we kind of become a little bit closed. Like our hearts
We get
become,
numb.
yeah,
Yeah.
we get numb. And so what I like to do, and this is taking practice, I used to have a very closed heart, a very closed mind. But over time, I've learned to open my heart. And it sounds a little bit fluffy, but when you look at these marginalized communities that Kayla was talking about, if you open your heart and you open your eyes and you see them as a human, I mean, I find that every person, no matter what color they are, where they're from, I mean, they're human just like you. You know, you could be at very similar, same interests, similar personality, and we just create these barriers, these walls. And so, yeah, it's harder to show compassion when we're so closed. So that's my advice when it comes to that.
Definitely. I came across a quote the other day that was speaking about, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was speaking about how opinion is kind of the lowest form, the lowest quality of thought, whereas empathy is the highest, because opinions, you can form opinions without knowing anything about any other people, and they're so inwardly focused, whereas empathy, if you can practice empathy for somebody that know nothing about, that was raised completely different than you and has a completely different life than you, like that's something powerful.
Another thing I'll say about these communities is that, you know, it's really unfortunate that we have these beautiful cultures, these beautiful stories, and, you know, it's getting stripped away and negatively impacted by policies, by people who don't see the beauty in it. And, you know, from there, like it's harder to make change and for us to rise together. But I think soon, maybe not in the near future, but I think honestly, and this ties back to Gen Z, because here at Creators for Change, we see Gen Z as the future. For some reason, I have this hunch that, I don't know, maybe even someone listening to this podcast in Gen Z will rise as like a world leader and they will be more open to this. And together we're going to rise as a species because someone had the courage to show up in that way and to go against these systems that are in place. So that's just a theory, and maybe we can come back to this episode and be like, haha, I called it.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I sure hope that happens.
yeah, I feel it. I really, really do feel it.
Yeah, yeah, that's the next step, isn't it? With all of this that's going on.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say about this is that I know there's a lot of sometimes things on social media don't seem what they seem. And so like it's like we're looking at something from different perspectives. If I look at something abstract from this perspective, I see it one way. If I look at it from this perspective, I see it another way. And so sometimes it takes stepping back and looking at the full thing. And I know with certain events, things seem a certain way because the media and headlines make it seem like a certain way. I'll give you an example. So we all know that there were recent protests in LA, which I live nearby, and the National Guard was sent, and headlines made it seem like things are getting destroyed, it was all bad. And I get that. Like maybe some people lost their minds. There's a big crowd of people, so there's many things that happen, but collectively, you know, a lot of those people were actually citizens, had their family established here. And last thing I'll say about this, because I know I'm talking a lot about this, um, like me, like take my family, like my family is a mix of European from Spain and indigenous from Mexico, and that's beautiful. There's stories there, you know? And so having that, we were in this land first, having that stripped away, pushed back, that creates generational trauma.
Mm,
And so if my great-great-grandfather, you know, his wife was raped and killed, and he was pushed back to Mexico because the land was taken, that ripples down in epigenetics in the bloodline. And so I think if we acknowledge that and we see people for where they are, then we can all heal and rise together, and it could be something beautiful. So,
definitely. That's where we need that empathy from people that don't have that shared experience, that shared generational trauma and experience. Because instead of like recognizing where family lines have come from, it's kind of become, I'm from this country, even though 3 generations ago your family wasn't even in this country. But now they're claiming this country that they're pushing away the people that actually have always lived here. This is a
yeah.
whole thing, but yeah,
Yeah, no, big time. And for those of you listening, we invite you to carry on this conversation in the comments. And of course, we encourage you to keep it respectful, but share your thoughts. You know, this is all a discussion. We're all here to learn and grow together. And the way we do that is by being open and respectful with each other. But
Absolutely.
moving on, Kayla, how can we reframe action? So we have all this information, we want to make a change, we see the injustices, and so what can we do to accomplish that?
Yeah, well, first I want to say not all action is visible or loud. Rest and boundaries and joy can even be action for yourself because obviously there's so much going on right now. Um, and being able to take care of yourself mentally and not just be so overwhelmed and anxious that you're stuck in this ball of yourself, that's a powerful form of resistance. That's super important action that you need to take in order to take the next step to educate people around you or join a community that is also going for the same thing that you're trying to do.
Yes, another way I'll frame that as I'll put a metaphor to it. You have to fill your own cup before you can pour that in the service of others. So if I want to help Kayla here, for example, and this cup here is empty and I pour from an empty cup, that's taking away from me. But if I take care of myself first, then I have more mental energy, more clarity, my heart's more open, I'm more grounded, the cup starts to overflow, and then you can give from there. I want to talk about the difference between reaction and response. Because what happens often is people will see things online, see injustices from a like a two-dimensional perspective. They don't look at the full thing. And so they'll react. And so what does this look like? On social media, you'll see many people just leaving comments sporadically. And so often this is instant, this is emotional, this is unconscious. It doesn't just need to be on the phone. It could be if you see someone on the street who, maybe triggers you. And that's what I just described, reacting. And that's often driven by fear, ego, and urgency. And that can escalate into situations that we regret later on. Do you want to maybe share another example, Kayla, of what that could look like? Reacting.
Yeah. Yeah, so I view reaction as more of a reflex, which can not always be well informed. For example, maybe you see a shocking headline on Instagram and then immediately put it on your story without verifying that it's true. And then later you find out that it was misleading. But how many people then saw that headline that you shared and then shared it with other people? So that's why it's so important to not just react.
Big time. Now, the difference between reaction is response. That's the opposite. And so you want to respond to information. And so this is more thoughtful, this is more intentional, and it's more conscious. And it often happens after pausing to process something. So when you take the time to process, then you can look at that thing from many perspectives. You can look at it from a farther view. And from there, you can align your values and your long-term goals towards making a change in that space. And so often this is more effective and more grounded. Kayla, do you want to share an example of a response?
Going off of the earlier example, you see a headline on social media, you're triggered by it, but instead of just reposting it to your story, you pause, you do research, find some verified sources, use the 5 C's, and then you can maybe make your own post going into an analysis of that content and why it's true or not true.
Yeah, big time. And everyone, we encourage you to do this. Like we do encourage you to post on social media consciously to spread awareness and raise people's consciousness and mentality. But just remember, as you're doing so, you don't have to be perfect. It's okay to put yourself out there and to maybe make a mistake. Maybe you didn't fully think something through when you thought that you did. That's okay. Remember, creators for change don't strive for perfection. They strive for that imperfect action that leads to growth. And so we want to talk about some examples of how small intentional actions can compound. So, small actions, many people think that, oh, if I do this little thing, it's not going to make a difference. But these individual choices or habits that may seem minor at first, they actually build change. They create these ripples. And I'll share an example, then Kayla, you could share one too. I recently did a 5-day workshop, a YouTube client attraction workshop. And a lot of change makers use YouTube and Kajabi. And so I was teaching. And so after that 5-day workshop, I invited them to work long term with me. Now, the reason for this, now it was, I kept the group intimate, but I was telling them, because again, most of the people were above the age of 50. I was like, the reason why I want to invite you to work with me is because I'm actually concerned about your healthcare plans. I actually care about your retirement plans. It's concerning. And so I want to help you build a system that is yours so that you don't have to rely on another job or another government program. You're self-sustaining. And so I got clients from that, a handful, maybe 3 or 5 more still showing interest. But even if I help 3 or 5 people build their own system, now they can support their children. Now they can support their grandchildren. Now they don't have to rely on these programs. And so that ripples in ways that I can't even fully fathom. So that's one example of how a small action can make a big difference. Do you want to share another example, Kayla?
Yeah, definitely. And even going back to your example, like even the people that didn't choose to join your program, you put the idea into their heads. You put the idea into my head, and I'm like, yeah, I need to have my own kind of system because who knows what's going to happen here. Um, but an example from my own personal life is that, I mean, obviously, like I've said, I care a lot about the environment. Um, and I take a lot of like small actions to try and reduce my own carbon footprint, whether that's bringing my own grocery bag to the store, using a refillable water bottle, and just start. I mean, I started doing this when I was in high school, and like just that one step to stop drinking from plastic water bottles gave me the courage and commitment to get another pathway to having less plastic and I don't know, just starting with something small like that can lead to somewhere huge down the line. Because when I decided to just use only metal water bottles in high school, I wasn't super into the environment. I didn't really fully understand what was going on, but now it's all I think about.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can inspire other people to do that too, and it makes a big ripple effect in ways that you can't fully fathom. So everyone really remember that it ripples in ways that you can't fully see. So
hmm
trust in that, have trust in that, and keep showing up in your most powerful form, and you'll create change not just in your own life, but to the people around you. I want to share another example of how small relational actions can make ripples as well. So one example is that this upcoming weekend, I have a friend who is hosting an event, and this event is all about sharing our stories so that we can like heal. Because many people hold in their stories, they bottle it in. People don't know their true versions and their true stories. Remember the generational trauma that stays in. So he's having this event, and so small relational thing. I just messaged him and I was like, hey, is there anything I could do? Like, could I bring like a fruit tray or some water bottles? And he was like, oh my gosh, yes, that would really help me out. And so by helping him out, he can lead that event better. And I'm bringing like healthy fruit that's organic. And so, we're going to be vibing, have good brain food. And like little things like that seem so, so small. So small, but they go like a long way. And I know it seems small, but I feel it. I feel that it will. And so
Yeah.
that's an example.
Yeah. And an example that I thought of for relational actions is I have been sending my mom a lot of like Instagram reels where people speak about different topics and like just sending her a couple of reels has made her start asking questions whereas she didn't ask these kinds of questions before and then she's bringing up these topics in groups of people that would never have spoken about it in this specific way And I think that that is super powerful. And also just sending somebody like somebody that's conservative, like a liberal leaning piece of media makes them get a lot more in their feed.
Yeah,
So I thought that was kind of funny, but also awesome.
that is awesome. That's cool that you even had that impact on your mom, and maybe who knows, maybe she'll spread it on to her friends.
Maybe we'll see, hopefully.
Yeah, and
But
yeah, everyone, that's like I do that too. Like I take the initiative to watch both right hand and left hand media, and I also watch media that's in the center. And it's been so eye-opening. Like I'll be very frank. I used to like lean very left, and I started taking in some right stuff, and I'm like, yeah, like like some of this makes sense. I understand why you think that way. I might not fully agree, but I actually understand you and I respect you.
right,
So looking at the left too, there's definitely some flaws. And so
definitely.
there's no perfect, it's not black and white.
Definitely.
Now, yeah,
And having the knowledge of both sides allows you to have empathy for both sides. Like it's so
100%.
important. That's the problem with the internet is that it's so easy to just look at one angle because there's so many different media outlets, so many different like even like science can be skewed right now. That's why you got to use the five C's.
Yep.
But there's this one resource that I've actually been using recently. It's called Ground News, and I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's a website of news, and they have different pages for different hot topics, and for each headline, they will show all of the different media outlets that have reported on this headline, and that'll show like this has been reported on 50% by centrist outlets and 13% left, however many percent right. I'm not that quick with mental math, but
Yeah.
it's really a powerful news source because you can see what each side is saying very easily.
That's awesome. I actually
It can
want to
give you
check
a
that out.
summary.
We'll put a link down below for those of you who are interested in checking that out. But we want to move forward with this and talk about some practices for moving from overwhelmed to embodied. So first off, what I want to say is that I know like many of us want to be change makers, but it's hard because there's so many like different areas. There's the environment, there's healthcare, there's higher education, the list goes on. And so, how do you choose where to focus your energy? So, my advice as you're going through the different causes, ask yourself some questions. Does this align with my values? Am I the right person to take this on? Will this action energize me or deplete me? You could take that a step further. Is this something that I could see myself showing up for every day? With this podcast here, I want to do this to the day I die. And so I picked it because like it's a niche, but there's room for space, you know? So that's my advice for this. Kayla, do you have any other things to add on for like filtering questions, or did I cover it all?
Yeah, I think you covered it all, but just to like put it into perspective, if I was going through social media, one post about climate, one post about the government policies that are being passed, if I had to pick one to take action on, there's an obvious answer to what I am more knowledgeable about and where I spend most of my energy, whether that's just thinking about it or researching or just, yeah, understanding it better. So I definitely should not act as an authority posting about politics.
Yeah, big time. And another thing I'll add on is no, you're not an expert with politics, as you say, but it's all connected. And so,
Definitely.
and so like everything's connected in a web. Even I studied marine biology as an undergrad, and I made this web, and I was like, wow, marine biology, like what affects the ocean? Well, policies does. And I was writing this web, policies, the media, the public, and I kept adding things, business, and I'm like, that's crazy. So things connect. And so you can hone in on like one thing. Like my main jam is online business, but I see how everything connects. So you
Definitely.
so you don't have to limit yourself.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about some practices for moving from overwhelmed to embodied. So Kayla, do you want to add to this? Because I know you have some good insights for actual practices we could do.
Yeah, so one of the more kind of like neuroscience based practices is always, or at least trying to get some movement in before you go for a scrolling session. Just even just like a 2 minute stretch session or a 5 minute walk around the block will prime your brain to take in information but not be overwhelmed because it releases endorphins in your body that are very regulating. It just regulates your nervous system. So that's a really powerful way to prime yourself for getting into one of these zones of scrolling. Another is to limit inputs. Uh, this can look like as you're on your phone on social media, instead of just like watching a video and being like, "Oh my gosh," and then just moving on to the next video and being like, "Oh my gosh." Like just settle on one. And if it triggers something in you, go do some research on it. And don't do too much. I mean, don't like go crazy, but like fully understand it before you move on to something else. And then that kind of can calm your nervous system. And then lastly, this is something that I feel like a lot of more people are doing these days than they used to. But instead of instead of just scrolling, if you see a video that makes you feel something, you can leave a voice note for yourself and talk about how it makes you feel and what you're learning, and then maybe even like put whatever research you put into it into that voice note. And the reason that this is so powerful is because that's turning it into action. Even if it's just for yourself, you're taking that information and doing something with it. And that's, even though it's just for yourself, it's very powerful.
Yeah, I did that once. I one time took in a bunch of information about the environment and I was on a walk, which I think got the endorphins going. And I just pulled up my phone and I was like, this is how I want to long-term integrate environmentalism into my brand. And I'm just like talking and saying, I want to have like a environmentally friendly real estate portfolio. And I kept like talking and talking and talking. And I was integrating everything I want. And my brain was like, and my mouth was moving. So that's a good way to just want to give an example to that in case some of you are imagining it. Something else I'll add on is this isn't talked about enough. Your best compass is your intuition and your gut. It's been shown that your gut has intelligence. Literally, like there's, it sounds crazy. You could do more research, but like literally, your gut has intelligence, and that's why we get gut feelings, and oftentimes they're right. And so follow your gut. I remember when I was younger, and I'm going to give an example, because even when, as we're young, we take in information from people, and over time, that turned into information from the internet and information from I remember being little and I was like in preschool, and one of my family members, I told them I made a new friend today. First thing to say, like, what color was their skin? And I'm just like I don't know. And I'm learning my colors at this point, and I'm like peach, tan, I didn't say black or white, but like my gut when I was little, I'm like, that's not right. And then over time, like society might condition you to think a certain way. And
Mm,
so that's your best compass. That is your best guide towards if information carries truth. Maybe some of you had a similar experience, but you're still going against your gut and following the conditioning. So that's what I want to say about that.
yeah.
Hmm.
No, it's definitely, I think it's called the three brain theory. Like you've got intelligence in your mind and your heart and your gut. You can do some research on it if you want, but it's really interesting and there's definitely some validity to it.
Big time.
So last thing we want to say about this is that no one person can be and do everything. And it's important to be able to make peace with doing enough. And that's why we've spoken so much about the small actions that you can take, because you're just one person, I'm just one person. We can only do one person's worth of work. So just keep that in mind as you're moving forward, because just a small action is more than a lot of people are doing. And just own that, you know? So just to close out, thank you for listening to this episode. Maybe to get the most out of this episode, turn it into action, you could think of one practice or mindset shift that you can work on, or think of one tiny action that you can take this week.
Yes, everyone. So think of one thing you could do this week to make change in your own life and also in the lives of others. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe to us, follow us on our podcast, stay tuned for our next episode, and if you feel called to, share it with a friend. Thank you for watching this episode, and we cannot wait to see you for the next one.
Thanks, everybody.